Hello everyone, Darren Bacon. Welcome to another installment of Concept Department. Today I'm going to be going over how I go from my scanned 2D image to my finalized Photoshop sketch. And before I get started, I wanted to kind of go over some of like design basics, sort of like how I got to the final. So on screen right now I have my scan image on the left, and on the right I have this, what I'm calling my final sketch. And so I just want to kind of cover like why I change things. Like before I dive into I'll do some sort of a process, time lapse kind of thing. But before I get going, I want to kind of just talk about design basics and how I got to where I went for the final. And so the thing with the final is it's not perfect, and but it's better. I would say it's like objectively better, and the reason why is because of just some design 101 basics. And so I'll just go over that and cover them really quick. All right, so to get started, I'm just going to flip the canvas so we have at least the same thing going on here, and right away I see that the perspective's not perfect and it's a little odd. So I'm just going to kind of tweak it a bit here to get it close to more closely match my sketch on the right. And so I guess first of all I'll just grab some red so I can mark it up, and I think I'm going to talk about what is wrong with this sketch. Right away you see I have this this circle theme here, right? This is like supposed to be like a big spare tire or something. And I think that's a neat theme for the vehicle because it's kind of unique. But one of the issues with it is that I have it duplicated around the design. And so that's cool to have like design echoing, but the way I've done it in my sketch, the sizes are all kind of the same, and that's not good because it just kind of gets boring. And medium density. And what I mean by medium density, this is sort of like an issue I have with most things I'm not like super fan of. It's usually because it has to do with the fact that everything's kind of medium density, and there's no variation in sizes. And so as you can see here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 circles. They're all kind of the exact same size, and that's going to really kill the design because if you just have a design where there's just like a bunch of the same shapes over and over again, it's actually going to be really static and kind of boring. What would be more interesting, so there I have here's like an example where I have 3 of these square shapes. What would be way cooler is if one was big and one was medium and one was small. Like that's going to be a better design, right? And so as you can see, looking at my sketch, everything's very medium density. And that's what I mean by that, where everything is kind of the same size shape. And that's just going to really kill it and make it not look very dynamic at all, and kind of be really stagnant, and the eye won't move around very well, and it's just not great. So looking over at the final, you can see I have this big shape here. This is my theme. That's my main shape. This whole thing here is like my big shape. If you squint your eyes and you look at it, you're like, okay, there's a big shape here. And then you have a smaller shape here, right? Or maybe like a medium shape, and then a smaller one. So then you have small, big, medium. That's more interesting, and you can do that everywhere, all over the design. And it kind of, if you zoom way out on this final, we can do this thing with a filter gallery. Let's do cutout, and let's let my computer catch up. Zoom out a bit. So I'm going to set it to the number of levels to be 3 because we want to look at it in three main values. Let's boost the simplicity up. Let's let the computer catch up. And there you can kind of see where I've got my three main values. This is just sort of like a quick cheat to just check. I don't know, it's like checking your math, you know, or something when you are doing algebra. So now let's zoom way out. Everyone squint their eyes and look at it. And what you'll see is that you have the dark is my big shape, right? So dark, biggest shape here. Let's just make it super simple. There's this white shape. I guess this is going to be my medium shape. And then there's this medium tone here. And so that's pretty dynamic, as you can see, right? I mean, if you squint your eyes and look at it, there's way more white than there is gray. And there's more black than white. I mean, I guess it's kind of balanced, but you see what I mean? I'm trying to, what I really want to do is I want to have there be this breakup of big, medium, small, dark, medium tone, and light. That's kind of like a good way to get started making a cool design. And it's really hard to do. I mean, I would say that this isn't even a perfect execution of it by any means. It's just, that's what I'm thinking about. And that's what I'm shooting for. I always think of design, it's kind of like a puzzle or something. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good example. Yeah, it's like problem solving. So if you think about it like a math problem or a problem that you need to solve, you have an equation, which is this. This is your equation, and you're trying to figure out along the way, like, how can you make your sketch fit these parameters? And when you do it right, when the math adds up, like, the design is better. So going back here to my old sketch and looking at my new one, let's just do the same thing here. I'm going to do Command F to just redo that filter I did. And you can see right away, like, that it's not super great because the darkest tone. Let me just boost this up a little bit with some levels. Okay, dark, light. All right, so the darkest tone here, it has some mid-tone along here. And then I guess you'd say this is just called this all dark and light. Like, this is okay, like, it's just not bad. But when you look at it in comparison, I feel like the shape design, that's another thing we need to think about too, is shape design. It's better over here. It's also a little more, on the new one it's better, I should say. It's just a little more balanced too. Here on the right, there's definitely more dark than there is light when I squint my eyes and look at it. When I squint my eyes and look at the left one, it seems really 50-50, right? It's like you have this line here, and then everything above the line is white, and then everything below the line is dark. And that's not very dynamic of a sketch, you know? It's just like super boring. And when you think about vehicle design, it's just like anything. Anything we do as designers, whether it's a painting or a sketch of a Jeep or a sci-fi suit or a Western costume, like, what it really boils down to is good composition. And so if you have a good understanding of composition, like of a scene, you will, it can all be translated to your sketch. So you don't want to have a stagnant composition by just splitting your image down the middle like I'm doing here, right? You have this, here's a composition where I just have a line right down the middle, and the bottom's dark and the white's on the top. That's super boring. It would be far more interesting as a composition to break that up into the rule of thirds, where you have 1/3 being dark and 2/3 being light. And then maybe if you break that down even more, you could say, you know, in here is our third shape, and it's smaller than everything. So now you have big right here, big, medium, small. That's it. So this is actually a far more interesting composition than the original one we started with. And likewise here, that's kind of what's going on. I have I have two medium shapes, and then I have this small shape, but my small shape is actually pretty big, and it's not really being pushed very far away from the medium shape. So it's kind of like I have medium, medium, medium. And that's what I mean by medium density. Medium density is bad. You can see it everywhere. If you look around at design, I won't like pull anything up, but it's everywhere. I mean, people tend to put medium density details all over the place. It's not just concept artists. I mean, I see it in cars on the street, in products on the shelves. Like it happens. And it's because the tendency is that we want to put interesting details all over the place in our designs, but you really need to have restraint in order to not do that. And it can be really tricky. Let's look at Braun design. All right. Thanks for bearing with me. I just pulled up 3 slides, 3 images from Google. Dieter Ramps. All right, let's just really quickly, I know this is like a bit of a tangent, but while we're talking about shape design, there isn't really a better guy out there that I'm aware of than Ramps. So let's look at it. Here on this clock thing, what is it, a clock radio or something? He's got a big shape, right? Then he's got medium shape. And then he has small shape. When you look at it, it's like so simple. But I think that's the challenge, is that sometimes, like I was saying, it's our tendency to just overthink things, and we forget how simple it can be. And when it's simpler, it's almost better. So like, there we go. Big, medium, small. It's so simple, but it's good. Same thing here. Again, you know, big, he's got big case, and he's got medium, and he's got a smaller shape. You could say this is maybe his medium shape too, and that maybe these buttons in the top are his small shapes. And I think that'd be cool. Why not? Let's say that's medium. Look how good this is. This shelving system is so cool. I don't know, like, I don't think I'd ever be able to use it personally, but just as a piece of design reference, or just like something, an exercise to look at, it's amazing. So look at here, squint your eyes at it. The main shapes down here are his big shapes. Then he has this negative shape here. That negative shape is actually this shape up here, which is just, he just took this shape and moved it over here. And now this part of his big shape is actually his medium shape. And then he has these small shapes. And he's made his medium shape out of a shape of his big shape, which is just super, super rad. So anyway, that's probably enough of my tangent on Dieter Rams. But when you look at these JPEGs now, and then you look back at this original sketch on my left, you can see why I wasn't super keen on the sketch, and why I made all these changes here in the final. It's all because I'm trying to find ways to really make this thing have shift from being all medium density to skewing it to being more big, medium, small. Big, medium, small is super important. It's really one of the main things I think about when I'm designing, and I encourage you to try it out. It made a huge difference for me. I've had mentors who have kind of like beaten this into me, and I think it's amazing. It makes all the difference in the world. It's super, super challenging. I still struggle with it all the time because it's just, like I said, it's hard to see sometimes, and you just have to really step back and ask yourself questions like, reminding yourself, are these shapes all the same size? How can I push them further? How can I get out of the medium density trap and really try to make my images more dynamic using these tools? So with that in mind, when you watch the process video for when I make my final sketch here, you'll see what I'm doing. When I'm doing it, I'm kind of, I'm struggling through it because it's really hard, right, to push away from this on the left to this on the right. So as I'm working, I'm always asking myself those questions, like how can I push this further? What's the best solution I can have here? And I also want to keep my shapes really interesting, and I want to continue, have my lines sort of like continue throughout. That's another thing I should touch on really quick is sort of flow with lines, especially in a product design like this or a vehicle design like this. You'll see, looking back at my old sketch, let me just turn this all off. There's all these lines that are sort of going all over the place here, and nothing's really like super coherent or lining up. I mean, it is a little bit, but by and large, nothing makes sense. It's just kind of like, it's a lot of lines just going all over the place, and that's not good. Looking at the final, I'm trying to make things like all line up, because if you have lines flow through your design, what it's going to do is keep the eye moving around. And as a viewer, you want to enter into the scene on the right here, or excuse me, on the top left. You want to enter in, and you kind of want to like move around the image and get lost somewhere in here, usually. I mean, that's generally composition 101. There's the golden ratio thing that looks something like this, because you're dividing it up, and you're doing something like that. That's probably a really bad golden ratio, but you see what I mean. So the idea here is having movement in the way your eye sees. And so when you're drawing your sketch, you would like to think about that. And so when you do that, for example, you might say, okay, I'm going to have this as a really important line, and I want to have things, move around here. And then how do I get the eye back here? And then this could be better done, but like trying to redirect the eye back up. Having a lot of area of interest there, because that's an important part of my composition. Likewise here, you just want to kind of, I wasn't drawing this rear wheel in perspective or anything. I just wanted my main goal was to have this be an interesting composition. I have this, whatever, I don't even know if this is a vent or something, just a way to kind of stop the eye there, because I want this to be important. I want a lot of emphasis to be here. So this is probably the area of most importance, like I said. So as you can see, I have my darkest dark, which is nearly black, and my lightest light. Like, it's just, look at that. It's like all dark there. And then I have super light here, because that's super contrasty, and I really want the eye to go there. So, and that's why, because I wanted this flow thing to be happening, and I wanted this to be really important. So I just used this trick where, it's not really a trick. It's just use this thing. It's a technique. It's design basics. You just have the darkest dark and the lightest light in your most important area. And also, getting back to the shape thing, you want to have your big, medium, small shapes, right? And so, as you can see, I have this big shape. My big shape is this big body panel. This big body panel here is really important, and I'm keeping it really clean. Like, there's almost nothing on it. And then right below it in this complex shape that I wanted to draw the eye to, that's where all my detail is. There's tons of detail there. So then again, you have contrast from like crazy detail to almost no detail. And that's just really interesting because contrast is interesting. It draws our eyes and it gives us this dynamic thing to look at. So yeah, that's another thing to be thinking about. How can you use contrast in the same way as the shapes, where you want to keep the shapes dynamic. Likewise, you want to keep the contrast dynamic by having contrast of detail, contrast of form changes, contrast of line types. And the more contrast that you have in the image, the better. I mean, it's the same thing with the big, medium, small stuff, right? Like, look at these contrasts in shapes where you have a big shape and a little shape. Contrast is important. So here we go. Big shape, little shape, contrast. Contrast between them. Detail, no detail. Contrast between them. Sharp lines, curved lines, interesting contrast. Right there, again. Straight line, curved line, contrast point. That's cool, right in my zone. All right, so that covers a lot of the kind of design basic stuffs of why this sketch was better than my left sketch, and sort of what I was thinking about as I was sketching, or as I was refining my sketch. And now I will go ahead and roll through a bit of the actual process of how I got there. But before I did any of that, I really wanted to give you a good understanding of my thought process and sort of like the design basics that I sort of went through to get from the left drawing to the right drawing. Okay, so everything that I just described, all of the shape design and, laying out all the compositional elements of the piece and flow and contrasts and all those aspects, that's really the hard part. The easy part is sort of the technique. Like, that's sort of never really the issue when it comes to like having a really compelling design. It's almost like it can be really secondary or even tertiary to having a successful piece. It's like the technique, whether if it was with crayons or with Photoshop or whatever, it doesn't really matter. All that really matters is how well you communicated the design by being sort of thoughtful in your design process. So like I typically do with all these pieces, this is going to be pretty similar in how I sort of do the actual process. I'm not really going to do anything new or unique here. I just kind of wanted to have it and show how this piece came to be. Right now, I have laid out a really rough perspective grid over my original drawing, and I'm going to be kind of showing how I work on the underpainting. So the first step is to fix the perspective by laying down a grid. And then the second step is to finalize the underpainting. And I've explained this before, but the underpainting, when I'm working with it, or it's like the back of a vellum sketch is how I've described it previously, it's sort of just the big basic shapes that are going to make up the design. And once I have those nailed, then I'm going to work over it in line work to resolve everything finally. So it doesn't matter how rough everything is here at this point. Like, you can see that everything that I've painted so far is super rough. There's just big smudgy strokes, and I haven't been thinking about what it looks like really, other than just trying to get the point across so that I can have these reminders later on when I'm working in line work of how I want to finalize the design. All right, so that's pretty much where I'm going to get with my underpainting. And now I've just gone ahead and I've put a white layer over and lowered the opacity so that I can see through my underpainting, and I'm just going to work over that layer on a new layer using a black opaque round brush to have my line work, my final line work layer be preserved above everything else. And that's going to be kind of like what this piece ultimately is. It's going to be a line work piece over this loose underpainting that I have sort of hidden with a white opacity layer, low opacity layer. So again, this is really similar to how I typically work. What's different this time is you're getting an opportunity to see how I think about those shapes in other elements to what makes up a compelling piece that I described previously, and looking at deuterams and all that, and thinking about big, medium, small, and everything. That's really what's important. And what's not necessarily super important is like how I do it. So when you look at this piece, you can see right now that a lot of the work that's gone into it has just kind of been like very mental. It's just sort of trying to find cool shapes and solve a lot of problems in design. And now that all those design problems are solved, I'm really just worrying about like how do I finish this piece off as quick as possible with as much or with as little information as possible to save myself time, painting it, because I don't really want to spend days painting this thing. I just want to use the most economic way I can to get my idea across to the viewer. So I really want this to be fast at this point, because I'm basically not wanting to burn tons of hours finishing it out. You can see I'm still working over with a perspective grid to remind me of where everything's at, because I want the perspective to be at least in the ballpark. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but it definitely needs to represent something that's close to reality perspective wise. You can see I'm doing my same old techniques, tricks with just using the smudge tool to warp around some line work. One thing that I almost never do is just preserve a plain old line work layer. I'm never sort of like that analytical about it. I'll definitely just work in opaque on a layer over. What I mean by that is that if I'm doing a black line work piece, instead of just using black paint or whatever, I'll use white paint as well on the same layer, just to sort of move the process along faster, because I can just quickly grab some white and paint it in, or paint out the black, or paint it black in. And what I mean to say is I'm just not super concerned about having a dedicated, strictly black layer, because that would just be too time consuming, and it would require too much like mental bandwidth to keep track of all my layers. Yeah, you can see I'm just sort of fussing with some of these details here, because I want to kind of get them making a little more sense, and I'm messing around with dropping in a center line to kind of find kind of a ballpark idea where the center is, to kind of help me make choices on where I want to lay out some of these details. These points can get pretty noodly when I'm just kind of trying to solve little tiny problems that aren't really super important, but just will help the piece read a little more realistic in the end. Because having details like little part lines and material changes and all that just will help in the realism and make it seem like a more realistic industrial design piece. And here I'm just sort of thickening up some line work, because it's always nice to sort of have thicker, darker lines whenever you have a form change near the pointing down. Just kind of helps ground the piece, make the dark lines at the bottom feel like they are a little more shadowed, and there's also a bigger form change, so they're going to collect more shadow, I suppose, is the idea. But it's just more or less like a little sketching technique. Now you can see I've moved my way down into the lower undercarriage of the vehicle. This is the first time I've had to make sense of any of this underpainting stuff that I was working on really loosely previously. Now I've got to go in with a line tool and try to make sense of it all, and so I'm having to think a little bit at this point and try to figure out how I want these pieces of machinery, suspension to work. So it can be a little tedious, and I'll try a few different things here and there, but ultimately it's kind of just made up, and I'm thinking more about the composition than I am actually necessarily how some of this stuff works. I just kind of want to move the eye around in a good way. I'll just scrub forward a few minutes, and you can see that I've been moving on in the lower suspension, and I'm mostly just continuing trying to make sense of a lot of these bits. It's a lot of the same stuff I've done previously, and it's kind of tedious because it's just a matter of going in there and trying to figure out how all this stuff's going to work. I could have done a way better job, I would say, in sort of like solving all this suspension work. It's not super believable. It's kind of fantasy because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. If I were to do another pass on this, like if this was an actual production piece, I would definitely spend some time to make sense with all these shapes. And I would probably try to have a lot of the line work that's going on underneath the undercarriage harmonize and echo with these shapes going on in the main body of the vehicle. But for the sake of the piece, this sort of does the trick. It's just not perfect, and it's definitely not, something I'm like, I would be proud of putting into production or something. It's just sort of like, this is a sketch to get my idea across. And if this were for some production purpose, there would be a lot more time and energy spent on solving all the shapes and design work going on in the suspension area. So as you can see, I've scrubbed forward again a few minutes, and I have most of the undercarriage stuff, the suspension work designed, and now I've kind of sketched out really loose interior cockpit seat setup. I just duplicated over. I'm just kind of trying to continue these details out to help give this vehicle some believability and real worldness. This is still insane because scale wise, like if this thing was real, it would probably be, I don't know, like the length of like 2 SUVs or something. It's pretty big. So it's not super realistic, but having details like these seats sort of like help make the piece feel more believable, I guess, more convincing to the viewer. Obviously you can see I've got some reference up on my upper left hand corner of my screen. I'm using those pieces just to sort of help guide me, inspiration when I'm sort of needing some cue as to like what I could do in a certain area. As you can see here, like the tread work that I'm working on right now is directly cueing off of the tread work on those concept vehicles that I have as reference. So I mean, it's like I'm totally just pulling details from that, and that can be kind of helpful to have. And so this is basically the extent of my process for this piece. Obviously, the bulk of the work happened at the very beginning when we were talking about how all those design basics work, and looking at other references for good design and thinking about good design when we're laying out the underpainting. That was the key, crucial, biggest step to this whole thing. And then the rest of it was just a matter of, going through the motions and solving all the problems. And once the problems are solved, just laying down a nice clean layer, low opacity white layer, so that we could do a final pass and line work over all of the rough, loose, sketchy blockout stuff. Once all that sketchy blockout stuff was there and all of our design problems had been solved, or at least, a first stab at it, it gave us an opportunity to go back over and then do all final line work and sort of tie everything together, all those weird shapes and lines and compositional elements. It was all tied together in the end with the line work. And that's kind of what I typically try to do in all my pieces. Okay, that concludes what I wanted to talk with you about today. We covered a lot of stuff, most importantly, the key takeaway should be understanding the principles and basics of design, and once you know that, how to translate it to your own concepts, and hopefully it can help make it better. Also, if you like what you saw today, please subscribe to my channel. The reason why is because it helps Google know this page is relevant, and that in turn helps more people find it, and that could potentially help them out. The reason why I'm doing all this is because the internet was sort of a community for me when I was developing as an artist, and I'm hoping to sort of just put some positive resources out there back in the internet, and that's sort of why I'm here. So if you believe in that, then go ahead and please subscribe and join me, and we'll do more of these in the future. And also, please don't forget to follow me over on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Twitter. There will be links in the field below, and thank you.